Hello students. So today we'll be discussing Elizabethan poetry. So in the last session or in the last period we had a great discussion about Elizabethan age and its characteristics. So Elizabethan age has been said as the nest of singing bird. So let us see in the Elizabethan poetry why it has been called as a nest of singing birds. It has been the golden age of songs and lyrics also. It has been well called a young age. It was full of boundless vigor and it was reawakened intellectual earnestness and unfettered soaring imagination. You can see it is the age of Shakespeare or the Elizabethan age, witnessed of the rarest poets in the history of England. The age witnessed the rise and the growth of the feelings of patriotism and nationalism among the English people and brought about an unprecedented progress in almost all the branches of its variegated life. You can see there has been a development of poetry and different kinds of the poetry. The age is considered as the golden age in the history of English literature. It was the age of Queen Elizabeth in 1558 to 1603, comprising the half of the 16th century. It was an age in which the mind of the people was set free from the trammel of medievalism and from free of religious persecutions and fear of poverty and starvation and from the fear of foreign invasion. You can see there is social, political and religious peace. Men were now free to devote themselves to art and literature. Literature can develop only when there has been peace in the social, political and religious background. So it reflects with a spirit of conquest and self-glorification, humanism, vigorous imagination, emotional depth and passionate intensity. The poetry of this period is remarkable for the spirit of independence. The poets refused to follow such rules of poetic composition. Consequently, new poetic devices and new linguistic modes developed. All varieties of poetic forms like lyric, elegy, eclogue, ode, sonnet, etc. were successfully attempted. Major themes used in the poetry are love, patriotism, philosophy, and satire. The Elizabethan age extends from 1558 to 1603. It can be divided into two periods. The first period may be called Age of Spencer and the second may be called the Age of Shakespeare. He is the greatest dramatist also. In the first part, we have the time of preparation for the spring tide of Elizabethan literature. The second is the time of full blossom and fruition. It's a great age. There are many factors which contributed to the richness in the literature. There was a Renaissance, it means the revival or the rebirth of the ancient Greek and Roman literature, mythology and culture, and this served as a source of inspiration to the countless writers of this period. There has been awakening of the human mind to the vastness, beauty, wonder of the world as a result of adventure undertaken by the sailors of England and other countries of Europe. The whole age was marked by rich poetic sensibility, nature appetite for learning and literature, love for the aesthetic faculty. England was poetically barren in the 15th century. So England was poetically It means there was no development of the poetry during 15th century. But the revival of the art, unlearning, a gleam of hope was produced. So there was such a growth of poets and singers of this age. That's why this age has been called the nest of the singing birds, by virtue of its wonderful fertility and variety and the splendor of its production. This period has all ranks one of the important verse literature men like Spenser, Bacon and Shakespeare. You can see these three people ruled this particular period. So when we just discuss about the poets of the Elizabethan age, you can see these three. Watt, Surrey traveled widely in Italy, and they brought to England the Italian classical influence. They modeled their poetry on Italian pattern. They are the first harbingers of the Renaissance in English poetry. They are the first modern poets. The book that contains their poems is Songs and Sonnets, known as Turtle's Miscellany. The brief introduction of the major poets of the age is necessary, and we'll be discussing about them. The poets who contributed much to the growth of the Elizabethan poetry were this Watt and Earl of Surrey, that is Thomas Watt and Earl of Surrey, who revives in the interest of the poetry by writing sonnets and lyrics. And you can see it is they who for the first time introduced sonnet in England. It is they who paved the way for the full flowering of poetry in the hands of Sidney, Spenser and Shakespeare. So we have Sir Thomas Watt. He was the first poet who introduced sonnet in English poetry by restoring beauty, grace, nobility to English poetry. So it is he visited Italy, France and Greece, and like Chaucer, he wanted to fashion English poetry on the Italian pattern, on the model of Petrarch. It's a type of a sonnet like Petrarchian sonnet. It was a sonnet that lyricism again entered to English poetry. It paved the way for music and passion, developed by Sidney and Spenser. Watt's poems were short but fairly numerous. They were for the most part translations and imitations both of Italian poetry, especially the love sonnet. Turtle's Miscellany, it was published in 1557. These are the love sonnets of Watt, paved the way for the love sonnet of Sidney and Spenser. It is then the fire of love burned with glow, and it was the credit of Watt that imparted emotion and passion.